right. So here we are. Again, you have the 3 different bolster types. You can have 2 blocks and a blanket. You can have a purchased bolster, which this one is not the biggest, but it's definitely not medium, right? And then if you are going the econo route and want to use more of your blocks and your blankets for a subset of support, you get a towel folded into thirds and then put 2 rubber bands on it. And you need 2 of these. So it's not necessarily that we're going to use all of these all the time. I know in the beginning, some people were saying they're handy for blocks because you can press down on these towels if you don't have a block, which is pretty convenient. But let's start with whatever you find builds up to support you the most. Now, if your knees don't bend, you do not have to do child's pose with the blocks underneath your abdomen. So the first part to release your lower back is getting a sense of having your abdomen drawing towards the back of the pelvis, right? So have whatever bolster you want to use here. I'm going to just take the 2 blocks and a blanket. And for a moment, if you kneel in front of whatever it is that you're going to use, take one hand to your belly and one hand to the back of your pelvis. And as you draw the navel towards the back of the pelvis, as if you're scooping out a cantaloupe, or more seasonally, if you're scooping out an acorn squash to get ready to put it in the oven, right? You have that sense of scooping. And then you draw the back of the pelvis down and lengthen up through the sternum. So you get nice length here on the side body. But there's gravity involved in terms of keeping your spine lengthening and lifting. So if your knees don't bend, and I want all of us just to try this because it is a nice release in the lower back. And if you find it's more releasing than, say, the child's pose, you can always go back to it. So right here, right above the pubic bone, is where we want to lie this edge of the bolster. Now, if you are using 2 blocks and a blanket, this part is for your head and this part is for your upper chest in child's pose. But when you're doing more of this trunk, you're going to have a bigger distance between blocks. All right. So I'm going to come forward in a table position, line up the start of my abdomen. So the pubic bone and the tops of the thighs are off. And then I lengthen out. So here I get a nice push up into the abdomen, almost filling in the lower back a little bit more. And I'm going to scoop the legs back so I really feel like it's scooping my abdomen into this lower back. Now, depending on where you're playing out here, you might have to add this towel or cushion or what have you for your head, right? Let the elbows be bent and the arms drape out to the side. And actually, it's kind of convenient with the 2 blocks, the blanket, and a towel, because my nose isn't being pushed back up into the head. So for those of you with tight necks and shoulders, what you want to do is have your chin a little bit more towards the sternum, so the back of the neck is long, and your elbows positioned in a way that it moves your shoulder blades away from your ears, not up into them, right? So let yourself use gravity to your advantage to drape over this bolster. So we're going to take 5 long breaths here. And then we're going to move into option B. So if your knees don't bend well, you stay here. Right? So as you breathe more deeply, there is the potential for a greater spread of the skin on your back body. So if it doesn't feel like the back of your pelvis is dropping down, you want to move off of your bolster a little bit more. Yeah, so Sal, you want to move back a little bit more on that bolster so that the edge of the bolster almost scoops in right below the navel. Like say, for instance, we did our triangle with our hands and the fingers go in right at this area above the line of the pubic bone. So you have your pubic bone, and then this is where the edge of the blanket is. And after your fifth breath, if you want to transition into child's pose and use the bolster, you would push into the floor, come up, and sit on your heels so that the edge of the blanket is maybe 3 inches in from the kneecap. Press the tops of your thighs down with the heels of your hands, rolling the inner thighs out, and then lie down so your chest is supported by the first block, and then the second block comes in to support your head. And this time, turn your head, position the elbows so that the shoulder blades are moving more towards the waist than towards the neck, right? So you don't want to be jammed up. You want to have some space. So I just move my hands back to create that space. So there's really no effort involved. It's about positioning your bones to create the sensation that you want. So if for those of you that have tighter hips and knees, if this does not serve you, go back out into the extended position where your legs are straight behind you. So now you know what's going to benefit you the most. And now begin another round of 5 long, full, deep breaths. And notice what let's go now. Because the more time you stay in a pose, the more opportunity you have to let go, because the supports begin to tell the body it's safe here, and then the body will let go. There is a term in physiology entitled the stretch response. So if you go too quickly into a stretch, your muscles will tighten. They won't let go, no matter how much you bounce in and out of the pose. And it's really not a good idea to bounce anyway. All right, so now prepare for a very easy downward dog. So come up onto your hands and knees for a moment. And now let the toes tuck under. Draw your navel up and notice how the buttock bones drop down. All right? Let your head hang. So this sometimes is entitled cat. Firm the outer arms towards the inner arms so you get that index finger mount, thumb mount down, and then begin to spin the triceps towards one another. And as you do that, reach your sternum out, lift your chin up slightly, and lift the buttock bones. So you start to get a little bit more sense of evenness between the front body and the back body, and then shift the hips back and come up for downward dog. Let your head hang. Some of you that are more open may just find that your head naturally lands in the bolster. Don't worry about it. If you're lifting and your head's hanging, that's also good. Take 3 rounds of bending the legs, taking your chest more towards the thighs as you stretch your arms, and then reach the calves back through the heels. See if you can open up those shoulders a little bit more by lifting the armpits up as you draw the thighs towards the chest. And then as you lengthen the legs into more of a straight position, notice if that supports or doesn't support your shoulders. And then after your 3rd round of straightening the legs, you can either come back down into child's pose or continue to stay in downward dog, enjoying the length of the spine, the stretch of the legs, the opening of the chest. And if you have your head on a support and it feels like it's pushing up, because some of you might be a little deep in your downward dog, you can always take away some of the blankets or the blocks or whatever it is that you're using to support your head.